Hello world, welcome to Rex Arthur TV. This is the Rex Arthur show where we discuss LGBTQ issues with an LGBTQ approach, with an LGBTQ perspective in an LGBTQ plus world. And we're just playing around with the L. And of course, you belong to one of the two letters in the LGBTQ alphabet. And today we are honored to do a video by Yuval Harari and Mark Zuckerberg, which is a conversation and what we are calling a dialectic, and we're putting it under River of Thoughts, Lab of Fikir, because a dialectic is a philosophical discourse in search of the truth. And we are discussing, I like Yuval Harari. He's a time scientist and he's a cosmologist. Because when you study time, you're a cosmologist. Historians are cosmologists. Religious people are cosmologists because they study the history, God. And I like time. I like studying time. I'm a student of cosmology. I'm a student of time. And time is very important. Every computer has time. Even you're a computer. You have systems and cells that are timed. That's why your genetic code has been timed. It knows when it's going to end. If nobody shoots you, if you don't go in an accident, you don't have an accident, nobody shoots you, your genetic code knows when you're going to switch off. The cosmic powers that be, for those of you who believe in gods, they know when you're going to die. That's the beauty of time. Look at my phone. My background is the stars. The distance between me and that star is time, is space, is distance. That's why to me the formula in mathematics is distance equals speed times time. If you want to know the time to get to France from Sudan, you divide the distance, you take the distance and divide it with the speed to get there. Because do you know you can get to France from Morocco to France? There are very many means to get you there. You can get there by air, by road, yes. By foot, you can walk from Morocco to France. Now, those different modes of transport have different speeds. Even to get to the stars, we are limited because we do not have machines that can take us very far to those areas. In fact, there was a stone that was said to have come from an interstellar plane. Another astral plane. And that was therefore an interstellar invasion of this asteroid that was found and landed in Earth. They don't believe it comes from any planet in the solar system. It must come from another planet, from another solar system, another astro system, because the sun is a star. Now, what does that mean? How could that stone asteroid reach here? It's because it's small. And even nanotechnology is the technology of making small things. And we are going to make very small drones that will be released in the universe and will travel all over the universe with a camera that's connected to the space station on Earth, and will be able to see the universe because of this small nano drone, small nano rocket that can be shot into space and travels. And because it's a drone, we can control it. You can control it. And we watch where it's going. So that way we'll be able to study. And because it's small, it can go to very many places and capture very many pictures. Yes, so instead of using these big rockets, because big rockets, their problem is they are so big, so they can't travel very fast. But a drone, just like that asteroid that landed in Earth, is very small. A nano rocket, very small, and therefore can travel to Mars very fast because it's small, and then you project it like an asteroid. So the same energy that an asteroid uses to travel across the universe, these drones we are going to make will travel to Mars very fast because they are easy to propulse. Propulsion. The jet propulsion of a small thing is very easy. Have you ever tried like playing with slings and catapults and throwing stones? Do you take a very big stone and throw to somebody? It's so big so it can't even go far. But a sling is small stones, and you do this and you whoosh. In less than a minute, it has reached a very far distance because it is tiny. So if we take nano rockets, they'll go to Mars very fast. They will finish the distance. Even within a year, they reach Mars because it's fast. And the propulsion is so much because it's so small, and it gets there. So that's what we're going to do. And this is what you need to know. The difference between me and the sun is time, is space. Like here, the distance between my right hand and the right cheek is no time, no space, because they're together. But when I remove my right hand, the more as I move it, there's distance, there's space, and there's time. Because it takes 5 seconds for this to come and touch here. And it's depending on the speed. Sometimes it can even be 3 seconds. 1 second. You see, that's what you need to understand. Okay, so enough of cosmology discussions and cosmological philosophy. Let us go to this great video. And as we know, for those of you who do not know, a dialectic is a discussion between two people. Let's look at what a dialectic is so that I don't get confused. It's the art of investigating or discussing the truth of opinions. So this is what Yuval, Harari, and Mark Zuckerberg are discussing. So that's what a dialectic is, and we can look at images. So it's a dialogue, a discourse between two or more people holding different points of view about a subject, but wishing to establish the truth through reasoned arguments. And this is what you will notice in the video between the discussion between Yuval Harari and Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg is a technocrat. Let's see his profile. And then that's how you'll understand the video very well as we go on. Mark Zuckerberg is an American technology entrepreneur. So he's a techpreneur. He's a techpreneur. And Yuval Harari, sorry about that. Yuval Harari is an Israeli historian and a professor in the Department of History. He is a time scientist. That's what you understand. and I love historians. I also love history. He's a time historian. So a time scientist. Historians are time scientists. They are futurists and they are pastists. They study the past to predict the future. And that's what is happening. So this is a good discussion between a computer scientist and a time scientist or a social scientist. So this computer scientist created social media that messed up the world of the social scientist Yuval Harari. And in fact, Yuval Harari has no smartphone because he was not happy with social media. The social scientist was not happy with social media because it messed up his social life. And so he wants Zuckerberg to explain to him why he had to destroy his life. And Zuckerberg is helping him to understand that social media has not necessarily destroyed social life, rather, or society. Rather, it is making society better. And this is what we're going to be discussing. So, welcome to our world.
I'm doing a series of public discussions on the future of the internet and society and some of the big issues around that. And today I'm here with Yuval Noah Harari, a great historian and best-selling author of a number of books. His first book, Sapiens, a brief history of humankind, kind of chronicled and did an analysis going from the early days of hunter-gatherer society to now how our civilization is organized. And your next two books, the Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, actually tackle important issues of technology and the future. And that's, I think, a lot of what we'll talk about today. Mm-hmm. But, most historians only tackle and analyze the past. But, yeah. But a lot of the work that you've done has had really interesting insights and raised important questions for the future. So I'm really glad to have an opportunity to talk with you today. So Yuval, thank you for joining for this conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. I think that if historians and philosophers cannot engage with the current questions of technology and the future of humanity, then we aren't doing our jobs. We are not just supposed to chronicle events, centuries ago. All the people that lived in the past are dead. They don't care. The question is what happens to us and to the people in the future.
Yeah. All right, so all the questions that you've outlined, where should we start here? I think one of the big topics that we've talked about is around this dualism around whether, with all of the technology and progress that has been made, are people coming together and are we becoming more unified, or is our world becoming more fragmented? Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious to start off by how you're thinking about that, and that's probably a big area. We could probably spend most of the time on that topic.
Yeah, if you look at the long span of history, then it's obvious that humanity is becoming more and more connected. If thousands of years ago, planet Earth was actually a galaxy of a lot of isolated worlds with almost no connection between them, so gradually people came together and became more and more connected until we reach today when the entire world for the first time is a single historical, economic and cultural unit. But connectivity doesn't necessarily mean harmony. The people we fight most often are our own family members and neighbors and friends. So it's really a question of, are we talking about connecting people or are we talking about harmonizing people? Connecting people can lead to a lot of conflicts. And when you look at the world today...
I like that. Connecting people can lead to conflicts, and I prefer harmonizing people. I was thinking about this, and I'm going to do a video next time about music. Music is very diverse. In fact, music is music because of diverse sounds. even speech, you know, I am not using one sound like you know, that's, I can't. It's, in fact, it's impossible to stay in one note. Speaking in one pitch is impossible. So boring sounds, they try not to leave the pitch, but they still leave it. So we speak in diverse pitches, we sing in diverse pitches. Now, music is the organization of diverse pitches to sound nice. So people are different. We are all diverse. And even in music, if you connect different notes together, some of them sound very bad. You know, it causes dissonance. But musicians create consonance. They create sounds that can sound beautiful. However, not all music is about creating consonance. Like rock music is very good in creating dissonance. You know, the distorted guitar, and then it plays distorted chords. You just, and you're like, what am I hearing? So it sounds very funny, but it's actually very the dissonance is beautiful, because when you listen to rock music, sometimes it's consonance dissonance, consonance dissonance. Same to jazz music, there are moments of consonance and moments of dissonance, and music is life. And so what I'm liking what Yuval is saying, harmonize. We are supposed to have harmony, and I'm going to discuss this next time. Otherwise, that was a good point he brought about.
You see this duality for example, in the rise of walls, which we talked about earlier when we met,
Yeah.
which for me is something that I just can't figure out what is happening, because you have all this, new connecting technology and the internet and virtual realities and social networks, and then one of the top political issues becomes building walls, and not just cyber walls or firewalls, building stone walls. Like the most Stone Age technology is suddenly the most advanced technology. So how to make sense of this world, which is more connected than ever, but at the same time is building more walls than ever before?
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting questions is around whether there's actually so much of a conflict between these ideas of people becoming more connected and this fragmentation that you talk about. I mean, one of the things that it seems to me is that we, in the 21st century, in order to address the biggest opportunities and challenges that humanity has, right? So I think it's both opportunities, spreading prosperity, spreading peace, scientific progress, as well as some of the big challenges, right? Addressing climate change, making sure that on the flip side, that diseases don't spread and there aren't epidemics and things like that. We really need to be able to come together and have the world be more connected. But at the same time, that only works if we as individuals have our economic and social and spiritual needs met. And so one way to think about this is in terms of fragmentation, but another way to think about it is in terms of personalization, right? And I just think about when I was growing up, one of the big things that I think that the internet enables is for people to connect with groups of people who share their real values and interests. And it wasn't always like this, right? Before the internet, you were really tied to your physical location. And I just think about how when I was growing up, I grew up in a town of about 10,000 people, and there were only so many different clubs or activities that you could do. So I grew up, like a lot of the other kids, playing Little League baseball. And I kind of think about this in retrospect. It's like, I'm not really into baseball. I'm not really an athlete. So why did I play Little League when my real passion was programming computers? And the reality was that growing up, there was no one else really in my town who was into programming computers, so I didn't have a peer group or a club that I could do that. It wasn't until I went to boarding school and then later college where I actually was able to meet people who were into the same things as I am. And now I think with the internet, that's starting to change, right? And now you have the ability to not just be tethered to your physical location, but to find people who have more niche interests and different kind of subcultures and communities on the internet, which I think is a really powerful thing. But it also means that me growing up today, I probably wouldn't have played Little League. And you can think about me playing Little League as that could have been a unifying thing where there weren't that many things in my town, so that was a thing that brought people together. So maybe if I was creating, or if I was a part of a community online, that might have been more meaningful to me, getting to know real people, but around programming, which is my real interest. You would have said that our community growing up would have been more fragmented, right? And people wouldn't have had the same kind of sense of physical community. So when I think about these problems, I mean, one of the questions that I wonder is maybe fragmentation and personalization, or finding what you actually care about, are two sides of the same coin. But the bigger challenge that I worry about is whether there are a number of people who are just left behind in the transition, who were people who would have played Little League but haven't now found their new community and now just feel dislocated. And maybe their primary orientation in the world is still the physical community that they're in, or that they haven't really been able to find a community of people who they're interested in. And as the world has progressed, I think a lot of people feel lost in that way, and that probably contributes to some of the feelings. That would be my hypothesis, at least. I mean, that's the social version of it. There's also the economic version around globalization, which I think is as important. But I'm curious what you think about that.
About the social issue, well, online communities can be a wonderful thing, but they are still incapable of replacing physical communities because there are still so many things that you can only do with your body and with your physical friends. And you can travel with your mind throughout the world, but not with your body. And there is a huge questions about the costs and benefits there, and also the ability of people to just escape things they don't like in online communities, but you can't do it in real offline communities. I mean, you can unfriend your Facebook friends, but you can't unneighbor your neighbors. They are still there.
Yeah.
I mean, you can take yourself and move to another country if you have the means, but most people can't. So part of the logic of traditional communities was that you must learn how to get along with people you don't like necessarily, maybe, and you must develop social mechanisms how to do that. And with online communities, I mean, and they have done some really wonderful things for people, but also they kind of don't give us the experience of doing these difficult but important things.
Yeah, and I definitely...
Yeah, so I like what they're saying, especially what Mark said about his life, that when he was growing up, and that should have been in the 90s, he was used to playing Little League, the baseball, where guys like playing baseball and they play around. And he had his social life, but he never had friends who were programmers, and he didn't start up as a programmer. Now imagine Mark Zuckerberg came up with his idea of Facebook in campus. Now, what does that tell you? 2020 onwards, there is a kid who is going to come with a sharper brain than Mark Zuckerberg. And there are children who are now in computer clubs at age 9. Now the problem of these children They cannot reach Mark Zuckerberg's mental infrastructure because of the age, but they have the material, they have the data to be greater than him when they reach the age he started Facebook. So these children who are now in computer clubs at age 9 and 10, they are there, very many, all over the world. What is going to happen when they're 23 years old? They will create a Facebook app. Better. They will create better computer systems than what Mark made. Now, this kid, there's a kid who is 6 years old right now, 7 years old. He's in a computer club in his home. Remember, this is Silicon Valley. These are computer scientists. Some of them have children who are growing up in a computer scientist environment. So their parents are exposing them to computer science. So what does that mean? They're going to become better than their parents. So what does this mean? Now, let's take the 6-year-old. When will he be 20? 18, roughly 14 years from now. So that means in 2033, that child is going to create a very powerful application that will change the world. So when was Facebook started? 2005. So the child who is 7 years old, when he was 7 years old in 2005, knows Facebook. Now started using Facebook. He's 10 years old. Then, that's 2005. Then 10 years later, that's 2015, the child became 20. So, and then 5 years is 25. 2020 he'll be 25. Someone is coming in 2021. Another Mark Zuckerberg. And he's going to come with a fantastic idea. Now, geniuses don't have to be 1 million. They only need to be one to change the world. Only one. You don't need 5 million children to get geniuses, because genius is very rare. Very few people have that IQ to think, to invent something. Remember, was there a problem really in communication? Yeah. And that's what Mark did. He solved that problem with Facebook. Now, Harari is just an old school man. How old is Harari? 43. And when Facebook came, if he's 43 and Facebook came 15 years ago, that means he was 28 when Facebook was initiated. So what does this mean? He reached an age whereby he had already finished school, and learning Facebook was like, okay, let me learn it right now. Let me see what it's all about. And then now he learned, but he still, because he learned it when he was a bit mature, it's not his cup of tea. But I'm telling you, the children who are on Facebook right now, my God, they are worshipping Facebook with their whole life. The teenagers. And they can't let go of Facebook. So Mark Zuckerberg has an empire of these young teenagers. They love Instagram. They love Facebook. They can't get... Like, I am personally in his empire, because I remember a friend of mine, he told me, why don't you leave Facebook? And I was like, oh my, I get so many people from Facebook. I make connections. You see, contrary to what Yuval is saying, Facebook in Africa is different. In Africa, you connect with people to meet them. Facebook is like a stepping stone to physical meeting. So it depends how you use your Facebook. For me, I use Facebook to meet people and to know people. So most of my Facebook contacts, I will definitely meet them in real life. to confirm their reality, to confirm that I'm not talking to a bot, but some other people, they don't use Facebook for that. They just use Facebook to know where their old friends are. Oh, where are you? Okay, you're there. I can see. Good. Okay, I can see you're going on well. Now you're driving a Mercedes. That's nice. Okay. So that's what some people take Facebook. It's not to make new friends. It's to know where old friends are. And for me, I use Facebook not only to know where my old friends are, but to meet new friends. So it depends what you're using social media for. And I agree with Mark that it has helped the society to be social. Like, I was an antisocial, but social media made me very social because I learned how to talk to people, of course, how to meet with people. And because with that antisociality, now social media helped me out to be social with everybody, and that's what has made me happy. That's why I don't mind Facebook. Of course, these days I have reduced my time on Facebook to do other things, and that's what I do. But I cannot delete my Facebook because it is very helpful to me. And as I've told you, I know how to control bots. Yes, I know how to control them. How I control them? I meet you. I make time to meet you. And if you exist, we will meet. Okay, let's go on.
Don't mean to state that that online communities can replace everything that a physical community did. The most meaningful online communities that we see are ones that span online and offline, that bring people together. Maybe the original organization might be online, but people are coming together physically, because that ultimately is really important for relationships and for because we're physical beings, right? So whether it's there are lots of examples around whether it's an interest community where people care about running, but they also care about cleaning up the environment. So a group of people organize online, and then they every week go for a run along a beach or through a town and clean up garbage. That's like a physical thing. I mean, we hear about communities where people, if you're in a profession, maybe the military or maybe something else where you have to move around a lot, people form these communities of military families or families of groups that travel around, and the first thing they do when they go to a new city is they find that community, and then that's how they get integrated into the local physical community too. So that's obviously a super important part of this that I don't mean to understand.
Yeah, and then the question, the practical question for also a service provider like Facebook is, what is the goal? I mean, are we trying to connect people so ultimately they will leave the screens and go and play football or pick up garbage? Or are we trying to keep them as long as possible on the screens? And there is a conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have, one model would be, we want people to stay as little as possible online. We just need them to stay there the shortest time necessary to form the connection, which they will then go and do something in the outside world.
Yeah.
And that's one of the key questions, I think, about what the internet is doing to people, whether it's connecting them or fragmenting society.
Yeah, and I think your point is right. I mean, we've made this big shift in our systems to make sure that they're optimized for meaningful social interactions, which of course the most meaningful interactions that you can have are physical offline interactions. And there's always this question when you're building a service of how you measure the different thing that you're trying to optimize for. So, it's a lot easier for us to measure if people are interacting or messaging online than if you're having a meaningful connection physically. But there are ways to get at that. I mean, you can ask people questions about what the most meaningful things that they did. You can't ask, all 2 billion people, but you can have a statistical subsample of that. And and have people come in and tell you, okay, what are the most meaningful things that I was able to do today, and how many of them were enabled by me, connecting with people online, or how much of it was me connecting with someone physically, maybe around the dinner table, with content or something that I learned online or saw. So that is definitely a really important part of it. But I think one of the important and interesting questions is about the richness of the world that can be built, where you have, on one level, unification or this global connection, where there's a common framework where people can connect. Maybe it's through using common internet services, or maybe it's just common social norms as you travel around. One of the things that you'd pointed out to me in a previous conversation is now something that's different from at any other time in history is you could travel to almost any other country and look like you dress like you're appropriate and that you fit in there. And if 200 years ago or 300 years ago, that just wouldn't have been the case. If you went to a different country, you would have just stood out immediately. So there's this norm, there's this level of cultural norm that is united, but then the question is, what do we build on top of that? And I think one of the things that a broader kind of set of cultural norms or shared values and framework enables is a richer set of subcultures and subcommunities and people to actually go find the things that they're interested in, and lots of different communities to be created that wouldn't have existed before. Going back to my story before, it wasn't just my town that had Little League. I think when I was growing up, basically every town had very similar things. There's a Little League in every town, and maybe instead of every town having Little League, Little League should be an option. But if you wanted to do something that not that many people were interested in my case, programming, in other people's case, maybe interest in some part of history or some part of art that there just may not be another person in your 10,000 person town who share that interest. I think it's good if you can form those kind of communities, and now people have can find connections and can find a group of people who share their interest. And I think that there's a question though of, you can look at that as fragmentation, right? Because now we're not all doing the same things, right? We're not all, going to church and playing Little League and doing the exact same things. Or you can think about that as richness and depthness in our social lives. And I just think that that's an interesting question: is where you want the commonality across the world, and the connection, and where you actually want that commonality to enable deeper richness, even if that means that people are doing different things. And I'm curious if you have a view on that, and where that's positive versus where that creates a lack of social cohesion.
Yeah, I think almost nobody would argue with the benefits of richer social environment in which people have more options to connect around all kinds of things. The key question is, how do you still create enough social cohesion on a level of a country, and increasingly also on the level of the entire globe, in order to tackle our main problems? I mean, we need global cooperation like never before, because we are facing unprecedented global problems. We just had Earth Day, and it should be obvious to everybody, we cannot deal with the problems of the environment, of climate change, except through global cooperation. Similarly, if you think about the potential disruption caused by new technologies like artificial intelligence, we need to find a mechanism for global cooperation around issues like how to prevent an AI arms race, how to prevent different countries racing to build autonomous weapon systems and killer robots, and weaponizing the internet and weaponizing social networks. Unless we have global cooperation, we can't stop that, because every country will say, well, we don't want to produce killer robots, it's a bad idea, but we can't allow our rivals to do it before us, so we must do it first. And then you have a race to the bottom. Similarly, if you think about the potential disruptions to the job market and the economy caused by AI and automation, So, it's quite obvious that there will be jobs in the future, but will they be evenly distributed between different parts of the world? One of the potential results of the AI revolution could be the concentration of immense wealth in some part of the world and the complete bankruptcy of other parts. There will be lots of new jobs for software engineers in California, but there will be maybe no jobs for textile workers and truck drivers in Honduras and Mexico. So what will they do? If we don't find a solution on the global level, like creating a global safety net to protect humans against the shocks of AI and enabling them to use the opportunities of AI, then we will create the most unequal economic situation that ever existed. It will be much worse even than what happened in the Industrial Revolution, when some countries industrialized, most countries didn't, and the few industrial powers went on to conquer and dominate and exploit all the others. So how do we create enough global cooperation so that the enormous benefits of AI and automation don't go only, say, to California and Eastern China, while the rest of the world is being left far behind?
Yeah, I think that's important. So I would unpack that into two sets of issues. One around AI and the future economic and geopolitical issues around that, and let's put that aside for a second, because I actually think we should spend 15 minutes on that. I mean, that's a big set of things. But then the other question is around how do you create the global cooperation that's necessary to take advantage of the big opportunities that are ahead and to address the big challenges, right? I don't think it's just fighting crises like climate change. I think that there are massive opportunities around
definitely,
spreading prosperity, spreading more human rights and freedom. Those are things that come with trade and connection as well. So I think that you want that for the upside. But I guess my diagnosis at this point, and I'm curious to hear your view on this, is I actually think we've spent a lot of the last 20 years with the internet, maybe even longer, working on global trade, global information flow, making it so that people can connect. I actually think the bigger challenge at this point is making it so that in addition to that global framework that we have, making it so that things work for people locally, right? Because I think that there's this dualism here where you need both, right? If you resort to just kind of local tribalism, then you miss the opportunity to work on the really important global issues. But if you have a global framework, but people feel like it's not working for them at home, or some set of people don't feel like that's not working, then they're not politically going to support the global collaboration that needs to have happen. And I think there's the social version of this, which we talked about a little bit before, where people are now able to find communities that match their interests more, but some people haven't found those communities yet, and are left behind as some of the more physical communities.
And some of these communities are quite nasty also, so we shouldn't forget that.
Yes, so I think they should be, yes. Although I would argue that people joining kind of extreme communities is largely a result of not having healthier communities and not having healthy economic progress for individuals. I think most people, when they feel good about their lives, they don't seek out extreme communities. So there's a lot of work that I think we, as an internet platform provider, need to do to lock that down even further. But I actually think creating prosperity is probably one of the better ways at a macro level to go at that. But I guess
I would maybe just stop there a little. People that feel good about themselves have done some of the most terrible things in human history. I mean, we shouldn't confuse people feeling good about themselves and about their lives with people being benevolent and kind and so forth. And also, they wouldn't say that their ideas are extreme. And we have, so many examples throughout human history, from the Roman Empire to slave trade in the modern age and colonialism, that people, that they had a very good life. They had a very good family life and social life. They were nice people. I mean, I guess, I don't know, most Nazi voters were also nice people. If you meet them for a cup of coffee and you talk about your kids, they are nice people. And they think good things about themselves, and maybe some of them can have very happy lives. And even the ideas that we look back and say, this was terrible, this was extreme, they didn't think so. Again, if you just think about colonialism.
Well, but World War II, and that came through a period of intense economic and social disruption after the Industrial Revolution.
Let's put aside the extreme example. Let's just think about European colonialism in the 19th century. So people say in Britain, in the late 19th century, they had the best life in the world at the time. Mm-hmm. And they didn't suffer from an economic crisis or disintegration of society or anything like that. And they thought that by going all over the world and conquering and changing societies in India, in Africa, in Australia, they were bringing lots of good to the world. And I'm just saying that so that we are more careful about not confusing the good feelings people have about their life. It's not just miserable people suffering from poverty and economic crisis.
Well, I think that there's a difference between the example that you're using of a wealthy society going and colonizing or doing different things that had different negative effects. That wasn't the fringe in that society. I guess what I was more reacting to before was your point about people becoming extremist. I would argue that in those societies, that wasn't those people becoming extremists. You can have a long debate about any part of history and whether the direction that a society chose to take is positive or negative and the ramifications of that. But I think today we have a specific issue, which is that more people are seeking out solutions at the extremes, and I think a lot of that is because of a feeling of dislocation, both economic and social. So that, now I think that there's a lot of ways that you go at that, and I think part of it, I mean, as someone who's running one of the internet platforms, I think we have a special responsibility to make sure that our systems aren't encouraging that. But I think broadly, the more macro solution for this is to make sure that people feel like they have that grounding and that sense of purpose and community, and that their lives are, and that they have opportunity. And I think that, statistically, what we see in sociologically is that when people have those opportunities, they don't, on balance, as much seek out those kind of groups. And I think that there's the social version of this. There's also the economic version. I mean, this is the basic story of globalization. Is on the one hand, it's been extremely positive for bringing a lot of people into the global economy, right? People in India and Southeast Asia and across Africa who wouldn't have previously had access to a lot of jobs in the global economy now do. And there's been probably the greatest, at a global level, inequality is way down, right? Because hundreds of millions of people have come out of poverty, and that's been positive. But the big issue has been that in developed countries, there have been a large number of people who are now competing with all these other people who are joining the economy, and jobs are moving to these other places. So a lot of people have lost jobs. For some of the people who haven't lost jobs, there's now more competition for those jobs for people internationally. So their wages, that's one of the factors I would, the analyses have shown that's preventing more wage growth. And there are 5 to 10% of people, according to a lot of the analyses that I've shown, who are actually in absolute terms worse off because of globalization. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that globalization for the whole world is negative. I think in general it's been on balance positive, but the story we've told about it has probably been too optimistic in that we've only talked about the positives and how it's good as this global movement to bring people out of poverty and create more opportunities. And the reality, I think, has been that it's been net very positive, but if there are 5 or 10% of people in the world who are worse off, there's 7 billion people in the world, so that's many hundreds of millions of people, the majority of whom are likely in the most developed countries in the US and across Europe. That's going to create a lot of political pressure on those in those countries. So in order to have a global system that works, it feels like you need it to work at the global level, but then you also need individuals in each of the member nations in that system to feel like it's working for them too. And that recurses all the way down. So in local cities and communities, people need to feel like it's working for them, both economically and socially. So I guess at this point, the thing that I worry about, and I've rotated a lot of Facebook's energy to try to focus on this, is our mission used to be connecting the world. Now it's about helping people build communities and bringing people closer together. And a lot of that is because I actually think that the thing that we need to do to support more global connection at this point is making sure that things work for people locally. That, in a lot of ways, we've made it so the internet, so that an emerging creator can...
But how do you balance working it locally for people in the American Midwest and at the same time working it better for people in Mexico, South America, or Africa? I mean, part of the imbalance is that when people in Middle America are angry, everybody pays attention because they have their finger on the button. But if people in Mexico or people in Zambia feel angry, we care far less because they have far less power. I mean, the pain, and I'm not saying the pain is not real, the pain is definitely real, but the pain of somebody in Indiana reverberates around the world far more than the pain of somebody in Honduras or in the Philippines, simply because of the imbalances of the power in the world. And earlier, what we said about fragmentation, I know that Facebook faces a lot of criticism about kind of encouraging some people to move to these extremist groups. But that's a big problem, but I don't think it's the main problem. I think also it's something that you can solve if you put enough energy into that. That is something you can solve. But this is the problem that gets most of the attention now. What I worry more, again, not just about Facebook, about the entire direction that the new internet economy and the new tech economy is going towards, is increasing inequality between different parts of the world, which is not the result of extremist ideology, but the result of a certain economic and political model. And secondly, undermining human agency and undermining the basic philosophical ideas of democracy and the free market and individualism. These, I would say, my two greatest concerns about the development of technology like AI and machine learning. And this will continue to be a major problem, even if we find solutions to the issue of social extremism in particular groups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we can now come in and discuss in brief, because they've said a lot, and I don't want to break down everything. But I'm very happy with there's some thought I've got about how colonization really changed the world. I've liked that point by Harari, and it has been amplified by Zuckerberg, that I used the word amplified, so I was remembering the Bible. He amplified this point that when the colonialists went to countries, they changed the societies, and it was a very clever economic strategy. they changed the societies to be like Britain, to be like France, so that these people can become human capital for the products that Britain was going to sell to the world. Now, you really have to understand something, especially the British colonial system. The colony was not Britain, but it was owned by Britain. So why was it not Britain? So that when the colony sends its raw materials to Britain, Britain would make products and sell them not only in Europe but in Africa and Asia. So you find the colonial project was to widen the Western economy, and it did it very well. Because look at me, I'm wearing this t-shirt. This was not an African attire, it is Western, and I'm wearing it. Look at the phone I'm using, it's a Western product. It's because I'm part of the Western culture. I'm a westernized African. 90% of Africans in Africa are westernized in one way or another and at different degrees, because the Western system was planted wherever the Western colonies went. South America, 99% of South America is Western. Asia, 99%, well, let's put it at 90% because of India, is Western. Europe, 100% Western. Tell me a continent that is non-Western. There is none. The Arab world, Western. Well, you can forgive them because they still wear the Arabic attire of the male gown and the female hijab or burqa. Sorry about that. So when you go to the Arab world, the women don't dress like Western women, and the men, not all men dress like Western men, although there are men who dress like Western men in the Islamic world. So what does this mean? It means the only place that has a lot of challenges for the West and for the world, because the whole world is Western, is the Arab world, because they are still holding a lot of their culture is not yet acclimatized. It's not even become Western, but the rest of the world is Western, and politically even the Arab world is Western, because in the Islamic Republic of Iran, there are presidents, there are armies, there's parliament. These are things that they came from the West. So that's what you need to understand. The West won the war of domination. And this is what I tell African countries. Where are you going? You are supposed to become more Western. It's already, what are you going back to? Where are you going back to? You're going back to using candles? You're going back to fetching water from the well? No. You're going to progression, tap water, piped systems. Very soon, you're going to subways. That's where you're going. You're Western. In fact, when Africa goes to China is a corn west. It's corn west. They are Western, but because they are Chinese, they tell you, hey, we are not like the West, we are Chinese. But they are just doing westernization of Africa. That's why China is not a threat. Globally, China is not a threat to Africa or to the West, because it's westernizing the world. Nationally, it's a threat because the westernization is not being done by the West, it's being done by China. So which means the West is losing out of westernizing Africa. But globally, the West is not bothered about China because they are westernizing Africa. So they are sitting down and saying, taking their cup of tea as China is doing the dirty work of building subways, bridges for Africa, and cities, and all of these things is happening because of money, and China has the money right now. And of course Africa doesn't want to deal with the West because of the very stringent conditions they place on Africa. They would rather deal with China, which is apolitical. They don't disturb you. You can be a dictator and they'll still build for you a subway. But for the West, they're not like that because they're democratic. And this is what you need to understand about the Chinese westernization of the world. It is not democratic because China is not a democracy. The West is a democracy. So Africa needs to choose, and it has already chosen China, which is a Western dictatorship. And the West is a Western democracy. So that's what we are having. The real war, politically, the war is between dictatorships and democracies. That's what you need to understand. And this is what they have been discussing. So at least that's the most important thing. I have really loved that understanding that the colonialists were actually expanding their markets in all the colonial lands they made. Because imagine, these colonialists would have come to Africa and not made anybody a Christian. Yes. But that would have been detrimental to their system, because if you're not a Christian, then you would not buy a Bible, you will not buy clothes, you will not buy medicine, you will not do things that the Western system had. So, welcome to the Western world. All right, let's go on. And what else? Let's see if there was any other important thing I got from Mark and Yuval. No, I think that's the most important point I really had to stress. Of course, now Yuval is complaining that AI, and I agree with him, AI is so powerful. Everybody's going to make AI military. The military will have an AI division. The police will have an AI division. Every office, law, courtroom, AI division. AI is everywhere, and people are losing jobs at the same time gaining jobs. So that's what's happening. People are losing at the same time gaining jobs because of AI. So AI is not really that bad, but it's changing everything in the world, you know. And look at medicine. These days you don't need diagnosis. If you have a smartphone, you have ADA. ADA is the application that when you have symptoms, you just type, I have these symptoms, and it gives you different diseases you could be suffering from. And then you can go and confirm that this is true at when you visit a doctor. And the doctor says, yes, you have meningitis. And then you say, oh my God, Ada did it, and Ada told me that that's what I have. You see? So you've confirmed with the application that Ada is actually working very well. So that's what AI has done. It has changed everything. And he's asking, of course, I am not a fan of saying good or bad, because I believe good or bad is relative. Yes. You know, in fact, that's why war crimes, it's very hard to judge war cases, because who is right in war? Who is right in war? You see, in World War II, it was very easy to punish the Nazis because they attacked unarmed people. They killed unarmed people. But when you have wars that people are armed, you don't know whom to attack. In fact, in war, if you invade a country, you're the criminal. Yes, if you invade a country, you're a criminal. But if you invade it for humanitarian reason, you see, that's what Obama said when they went to Syria, that they are using humanitarian intervention. They are going to save the country, the human beings that are there. So that's a pretext. It's used as a cover to enter a country. It's a legal justification for war, and that one is okay. So, of course, I'm not saying there's no universal good and no universal bad. Like murder is universally bad. Yes, you shouldn't kill anybody, and you shouldn't violate anybody's human rights. That's what I always tell people. And if that's the case, then we have common values. We have common values. However, when it comes to sex, when it comes to culture, dressing, those are not harmful acts. You're not killing somebody's life when you are a gay person. I mean, whom are you killing when you're gay? Whom are you killing when you're a transgender? So, in many things, there's no universality, and that's what they're saying. I even like what they said about the fact that now Facebook is no longer about connectivity, but it's about community, building communities. But Yuval has questioned that and told Zuckerberg that, even if you say that's for building communities, you have to understand that Facebook has become another planet, in the sense that there are diverse geographic regions. Facebook is in poor countries and rich countries. This is why the poor countries, their situation is not loud in the rich countries, but the situations of rich countries are loud in the poor countries because of those inequalities. So that's what Yuval is trying to tell Mark, that just understand the world, it is still divided, and it's diverse, it is unequal, and what we are left to do is to develop Africa. In fact, the whole world has to put effort in the third world. Yes, that's it. There is nothing else we can say. The third world, and the third world has to accept, because you see, it's not that the first world can't help the third world. Is the third world ready to accept? Because the third world is not really looking forward to another moment where you see white people in the continent. They're just like, oh my God, they're colonizing us again. You see, like China. Do you see why Africans are calling Chinese colonizers? It's because they are not African. So they feel like they're being colonized. So that's why I'm asking African countries, where are we going? Are we westernizing, or we are going back to natural Africa, whereby we had no buildings, we had no running water? That's the question Africa must answer. And the earlier they answer it, the better. Rwanda has answered. They're going to the West. And that's why things are working. They're westernizing. You see? And you westernize in every sector. In the politics, economics, society. Individualism is increased. Yes, that's what's going to happen. Culture, reformation. How many Africans speak their languages in the office? Very few. It's because you have been westernized. And it's good. I prefer the Western culture. Personally, it's the best culture ever. And what I like about it is liberty. You're free to do whatever you want. I love it for that. All right, let's go on.
Yeah, I certainly agree that extremism is I would think about it more as a symptom and a big issue that needs to be worked on. But I think the bigger question is making sure that everyone has a sense of purpose, has a role that they feel matters, and social connections, because at the end of the day we're social animals, and I think it's easy in our theoretical thinking to abstract that away, but that's such a fundamental part of who we are. So that's why I focus on that. I don't know, do you want to move over to some of the AI issues? Because I think that's or do you want to stick on this topic for a second?
No, I mean, this topic is closely connected to AI. Again, because I think that, one of the disservices that science fiction, and I'm a huge fan of science fiction, but I think it has done some pretty bad things, which is to focus attention on the wrong scenarios and the wrong dangers. That people think, AI is dangerous because the robots are coming to kill us. And this is extremely unlikely. That will face a robot rebellion. I'm much more frightened about robots always obeying orders than about robots rebelling against the humans. I think the two main problems with AI, and we can explore this in greater depth, is what I just mentioned. First, increasing inequality between different parts of the world, because you'll have some countries which lead and dominate the new AI economy, and this is such a huge advantage that it kind of trumps everything else. And we will see, if we had the Industrial Revolution creating this huge gap between a few industrial powers and everybody else, and then it took 150 years to close the gap, and over the last few decades, the gap has been closed, or closing, as more and more countries which were far behind are catching up. Now the gap may reopen and be much worse than ever before because of the rise of AI, and because AI is likely to be dominated by just a small number of countries. So that's the one issue, AI and inequality. And the other issue is AI and human agency, or even the meaning of human life. What happens when AI is mature enough and you have enough data to basically hack human beings, and you have an AI that knows me better than I know myself and can make decisions for me, predict my choices, manipulate my choices, and authority increasingly shifts from humans to algorithms. So not only decisions about which movie to see, but even decisions like which community to join, who to befriend, whom to marry. We increasingly rely on the recommendations of the AI, and what does it do to human life and human agency? So these I would say the two most important issues of AI inequality and AI and human agency.
Yeah. And I think both of them get down to a similar question around values, right? And who's building this, and what are the values that are encoded, and how does that end up playing out? I tend to think that in a lot of the conversations around AI, we almost personify AI, right? Your point around killer robots or something like that, but I actually think AI is very connected to the general tech sector, right? So almost every technology product, and increasingly a lot of not what you call technology products, are made better in some way by AI. So it's not like AI is a monolithic thing that you build. It powers a lot of products. So it's a lot of economic progress, and can get towards some of the distribution of opportunity questions that you're raising. But it also is fundamentally interconnected with these really socially important questions around data, and privacy, and how we want our data to be used, and what are the policies around that, and what are the global frameworks. And so one of the big questions that, so I tend to agree with a lot of the questions that you're raising, which is that a lot of the countries that have the ability to invest in future technology, of which AI and data and future internet technologies are certainly an important area, are doing that because it will give their local companies an advantage in the future, right? And to be the ones that are exporting services around the world. I tend to think that right now, the United States has a major advantage that a lot of the global technology platforms are made here, and certainly a lot of the values that are encoded in that are shaped largely by American values. They're not only. I mean, speaking for Facebook, I mean, we serve people around the world, and we take that very seriously. But certainly ideas like giving everyone a voice, that's something that is probably very shaped by the American ideas around free speech and strong adherence to that. So I think culturally and economically, there's an advantage for countries to develop, to kind of push forward the state of the field, and have the companies that in the next generation are the strongest companies in that. So certainly you see different countries trying to do that, and this is very tied up in not just economic prosperity and inequality,
do they have
but
a
also
real chance? I mean, does a country like Honduras, Ukraine, Yemen has any real chance of joining the AI race, or are they already out? I mean, it's not going to happen in Yemen. It's not going to happen in Honduras. And then what happens to them in 20 years or 50 years?
Some of this gets down to the values around how it's developed, though. Right? I think that there are certain advantages that countries with larger populations have, because you can get to critical mass in terms of universities and industry and investment and things like that. But one of the values that we here, right, both at Facebook and I think generally in the academic system of trying to do research, hold is that you do open research, right? So a lot of the work that's getting invested into these advances, in theory, if this works well, should be more open. So then you can have an entrepreneur in one of these countries that you're talking about, which maybe isn't a whole industry-wide thing, and certainly I think you'd bet against sitting here today that in the future all of the AI companies are going to be in a given small country. But I don't think it's far-fetched to believe that there will be an entrepreneur in some place who can use Amazon Web Services to spin up instances for compute, who can hire people across the world in a globalized economy, and can leverage research that has been done in the US or across Europe or in different open academic institutions or companies that increasingly are publishing their work, that are pushing the state-of-the-art forward on that. So I think that there's this big question about what we want the future to look like. And part of the way that I think we want the future to look is we want it to be open. We want the research to be open. I think we want the internet to be a platform. And this gets back to your unification point versus fragmentation. One of the big risks, I think, for the future is that the internet policy in each country ends up looking different and ends up being fragmented. And if that's the case, then I think the entrepreneur in the countries that you're talking about in Honduras probably doesn't have as big of a chance if they can't leverage all the advances that are happening everywhere. But if the internet stays one thing and the research stays open, then I think that they have a much better shot. So when I look towards the future, one of the things that I just get very worried about is the values that I just laid out are not values that all countries share. And when you get into some of the more authoritarian countries and their data policies, they're very different from the kind of regulatory frameworks that across Europe and across a lot of other people are talking about or have put into place. And just to put a finer point on it, recently I've come out and I've been very vocal that I think that more countries should adopt a privacy framework like GDPR in Europe. And a lot of people, I think, have been confused about this. They're like, well, why are you arguing for more privacy regulation? Why now, given that in the past you weren't as positive on it? And I think part of the reason why I am so focused on this now is I think at this point, people around the world recognize that these questions around data and AI and technology are important. So there's going to be a framework in every country. I mean, it's not like there's not going to be regulation or policy. So I actually think the bigger question is, what is it going to be? And the most likely alternative to each country adopting something that encodes the freedoms and rights of something like GDPR, in my mind, the most likely alternative is the authoritarian model, which is currently being spread, which says as every company needs to store everyone's data locally in data centers, and if I'm a government, I should be able to go send my military there and be able to access whatever data I want, and be able to take that for surveillance or military or helping local military industrial companies. And I mean, I just think that that's a really bad future, right? That's not the direction that that I, as someone who's building one of these internet services, or just as a citizen of the world, want to see the world going.
To be the devil's advocate for a moment, I mean, if I look at it from the viewpoint, let's say, of India, so I listened to the American president saying America first, and I'm a nationalist, I'm not a globalist, I care about the interests of America, and I wonder, is it safe to store the data about Indian citizens in the US and not in India, when they're openly saying they care only about themselves? So why should it be in America and not in India?
Well, I think that there's the motives matter, and certainly I don't think that either of us would consider India to be an authoritarian country that has. So I would say that.
It can still say we want data and metadata on Indian users to be stored on Indian soil. We don't want it to be stored on American soil or somewhere else.
Yeah, and I can understand the arguments for that, and I think that there's. The intent matters, right? And I think countries can come at this with open values, and still conclude that something like that could be helpful. But I think one of the things that you need to be very careful about is that if you set that precedent, you're making it very easy for other countries that don't have open values and that are much more authoritarian and want the data not to protect their citizens, but to be able to surveil them and find dissidents and lock them up. So I think
I agree. I mean, but I think that it really boils down to the questions that do we trust America? And given the past 2-3 years, people in more and more places around the world, I mean, previously, say if we were sitting here 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 40 years ago, then America declared itself to be the leader of the free world. We can argue a lot whether this was the case or not, or at least on the declaratory level, this was how America presented itself to the world. We are the leaders of the free world, so trust us, we care about freedom. But now we see a different America. America which doesn't want even to be, again, it's not a question of even what they do, but how America presents itself no longer as the leader of the free world, but as a country which is interested above all in itself and in its own interests. And just this morning, for instance, I read that the US is considering having a veto on the UN resolution against using sexual violence as a weapon of war. And the US is the one that thinks of vetoing this. And as somebody who is not a citizen of the US, I ask myself, can I still trust America to be the leader of the free world if America itself says, I don't want this role anymore?
Well,
wonderful. And I think we're going to end there because it's a very long video. So we're going to do parts of it and we can end part 1 there. But I'm very happy with Yuval, and he's really attacking America Zuckerberg is the representation of America, and Yuval is the representation of the world, but through Israel's eyes. And I'm happy with him. He has really said something very important about what America is doing right now. Now, America is, when Obama was president for almost 10 years, he managed to build a global world. And he managed to, of course, he was a globalist, which I am. I am also a globalist. I believe the world should be united as one country, and I should travel to any country and be accepted. Nobody should sense anything wrong to me, and nobody should feel like I'm a foreigner. but they should look at me as a human being. So I am a supporter of globalism. But when Trump came to power in 2016, he was a different guy, and this is what Yuval is saying. America changed, and we were getting a tone of nationalism, a lot of protectionism, a lot of isolation, and a lot of religious sentiment. Like, see, already they want to veto that UN resolution on sexual violence, and it meaning they don't see sexual violence as a crime. And that's America, and it's scaring Yuval, because the free world, America was the leader of the free world. It's supposed to be the icon of democracy, the god of democracy. We're supposed to all dream like to be America. Like, personally, I love America, and I wish every country in the world had the American system. It's a very rich system. It's a very commercial model. Of course, it has its downsides, and poverty can be grinding, but not so bad, but grinding enough because of the inequalities. But basically, if you improve the economic downsides with a bit of the Danish model, then you will have a very good country. And what you also need to know, as we also conclude the video, I don't want to talk much, every country is a model. It is a model economy. Every country. Now, what I do is I study every country and look at their model, and then go to the statistics and see where they are shining. If they are shining in Human Development Index, I find out why are they shining in Human Development Index. It is because of the model they are using. Now, when you look at the countries that they've succeeded, they have very high Human Development Index. Majority of them use the Nordic model. The Nordic model is the country used by Scandinavia, the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands, a bit of Netherlands. They use the Nordic system. Now, the Nordic model has given these countries a very good Human Development Index. But what they have not given is billionaires. Let's just look right now as we end the video. Country that has the highest number of billionaires. Countries that have the highest number of billionaires. Look at that. America has 585 billionaires. Is it a Nordic country? No. Nordic model? No. Number 2, China. 476 billionaires. Is it a Nordic country? No. Does it use the Nordic model? By no means. It uses the capitalist, socialist, therefore communist system. India. 131 billionaires. Is it using the Nordic model? No. Germany. Number 4. 114 billionaires. Is it using the Nordic model? No. Let's see the 70 rows. Can they give them to me? No, we have to go to the website, the article itself. Look at the map. Are you seeing Africa has no data? Very few countries have very many billionaires. In fact, Tanzania is there in riches. And I think they have 1 to 5 billionaires, and Angola also has 1 to 5 billionaires, and Nigeria, and then you have South Africa is in some deep red. They have 11 to 50 billionaires. Now look at South Africa. What is the model South Africa uses? It's a capitalist country. It's American model. That's what they use. Look at America. It's so black. That's 500 plus billionaires. The only black shade country is America. So I've already done that. But regionally, in the world, we have 2,208 billionaires. Now, regionally, Asia is number one. It has 719 billionaires. And they are all worth 50 billion. In America, there are 631 billionaires, less than 100. However, they are worth more than the Asians, who are many. There are many billionaires, but that doesn't mean they have a lot of wealth. America has less billionaires. North America has less billionaires than Asia, but they are worth more than the Asian billionaires. Now, number 3, it is Europe. 559 billionaires at 83.7 billion, meaning they have more money than the billionaires of Asia. So Asia has many billionaires, but they don't have a lot of wealth compared to Europe and America. So number 1, America. Number 2, Europe. Number 3, Asia. And Africa is the last one with only 25 billionaires and 14.1 worth 14.1 billion. Now, why did you have to do this? It is to show you, especially the country list was the most important. It was to show you. So you see Germany, Russia is number 5. We've already done Germany. UK, no Nordic model. Number 8, Brazil, no Nordic model. Italy, no. Where are the nodes? They are not there. They are not even in the top 10. Why? Because the Nordic model is a very highly taxed system. They tax people very high. And because of that, they can't appear there. That's why when you see Sweden here, you congratulate them for being number 16 with a taxation rate of over 50%. People are taxed 50% plus in Sweden to keep the social programs going on. Unbelievable. Now look, are you seeing Netherlands? Are you seeing Norway, 25? Denmark, 37. Now let's go to the human index and you will laugh your head off. Let's go there and you will laugh your head off. Human index is a statistic that shows you life expectancy, education, combines education and all of these things together. Now, I want you to look where America is, where China is, where India is, where Russia is, and where Germany is, the top 5 countries which have billionaires. So, the origins, as I've told you, it is the index that measures a country scores higher HDI when the lifespan is higher and the education level is higher and the gross national income is higher. So we want to catch these billionaires. So it's about life expectancy, education, and per capita income. Now, it is trying to say if you're well educated, you will earn well and you will live longer. That is what Human Development Index is all about. When you are educated well, you will earn well, and then you will live well. When you're not educated well, you will earn little and you won't live well because you can't buy food that can take care of you well. So, let's look at the 2018 report. Now, look at the countries. Number 1, Nordic, Norway. Number 2, Switzerland, not Nordic. Number 3, Australia, not Nordic. Number 4, Ireland, not Nordic. Number 5, Germany, not Nordic. Number 6, Nordic Islands, Iceland. Number 7, Hong Kong, not Nordic. Number 7 again, Sweden, Nordic. Number 9, Singapore, not Nordic. Number 10, Netherlands, partially Nordic. Number 11, Nordic. How many Nordic countries? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 10 or out of 11. 5 Nordic countries. They are not even in the top 10 of the billionaires. But when it comes to human development, they are leading. Now let's look at the Nordic model again. So I'm doing this because of what Yuval Harari has talked about, that, Nordic model refers to the economic and social policies common to the Nordic countries. These include a comprehensive welfare state and collective bargaining at the national level, with a high percentage of the workforce unionized, while being based on economic foundations of free market capitalism. So they are not socialists, they are capitalist socialists. And very beautiful. And we're going to have our time to discuss different economic models. You see public pension plans, strong property rights, low levels of corruption, little product market regulation, high percentage of workers in labor unions, partnership between employers and trade unions and the government. World happiness, they are very happy because of their dialogue, the highest ranking for protection of workers' rights. GDP 56.6% there's a lot of public spending. One key reason for public spending is a large number of public employees. So there's big government in these countries. And overall tax burdens, Sweden 44.1%, Denmark 45%, Finland 44%. They have relatively flat tax rates, meaning that even those with medium and low incomes are taxed at relatively high levels. So there's no progressive taxation or regressive taxation. Political ideology is social democracy. The ideology of the Nordic Labour parties refers to a set of policies for promoting economic security and opportunity with the framework of capitalism rather than a replacement for capitalism. So they support capitalism, but they socialize capitalism. So that is what you see, the Nordic model. And you see they have done very well when it comes to collective prosperity. But when it comes to individual prosperity, they are not featuring. Billionaires are not in Sweden. There is no Swedish billionaire in Forbes list. And that's what they're trying to say, that the Nordic model values the grassroots, values the people rather than the individual. Now, that's what I just wanted to show you. There are different types of economies. Now, every country has its model. And America has its model. Of course, America we're going to discuss all of these economies and discuss their models. China has its model. Of course, it's a Western economy, synonized. African countries have their models. You've seen South Africa has more billionaires than Angola, which has oil. And you can find out the reason why. So everybody, let's study every country. And then when you studied every country, Pick which model is working. And I feel I support the Nordic model. I love it. And Bernie Sanders also likes the Nordic model because it makes everybody happy. Yes, I also like the Nordic. It makes everybody happy, but of course, on the downside, you won't have very rich people because most of the money they'll be taxed. But it's okay. I mean, like America, if America adopts the Nordic model right now, they won't suffer. Yes, the rich won't suffer because if you've seen the 44% tax rate and it's applied to everybody, the real people suffering in the Nordic model is the poor. You see, that's the problem. It's still capitalistic. So the poor suffer because if you take 44% from a billionaire, he will still have billions. But if you take 44% from a thousandaire, that's a poor person, or a hundredaire, they will have less than $100 or less than $1,000. So you are basically killing them. So that's why there are different taxation models. You have progressive taxes. The more you earn, the more tax you pay, and the regressive taxes, the more you earn, the more you earn, the more tax you pay. That's progressive. And regressive, the more you earn, the less you pay, because they want to encourage capitalism, venture. They want you to do more. So one of the incentives they do, they chop the taxes so that you can, and that's what Trump is doing in America. But its problem is that it makes the middle class and the poor hurt because they are still paying taxes and their salaries are not changing. So life becomes very hard for them. But the rich are the ones who are smiling in America now because they can open more companies, because they have more capital, because they're being taxed less. And that's why Trump is getting people are getting jobs, because the capitalists now have money to set up plants and they are not afraid of the tax. But the problem is that even if you get a job, life will still be hard because you're the one who's going to carry the tax burden for the rich. So that's the problem of that tax model. Now, the Nordic one is an equal tax rate, flat rate for everybody. So the advantage of that one is the rich are able to pay taxes, and the poor forever taxes are the enemy of the poor because you don't have a lot of money. And the only tax model that makes a poor man happy is a progressive tax, because the less you earn, the less you pay, because you earn little. So the government does not put a lot of burden on you. That's why I support Andrew Yang to give, where he wants to have universal basic income. So you give $1,000 to everybody, poor or rich. So who is going to gain in that? The poor, because he's working. The working poor, he's working, but he gets an injection, he gets a boost through UBI, which is a better way of making the economy grow and making the poor people not have a very very harsh response from the economy because they don't have money. You see, that's why I support UBI. I support Andrew Yang. Whether he wins the election or not, there should be a very big discussion about UBI. Of course, in Europe, they are still discussing it, and it's going to happen. Yes, I prefer it because when there's money in the system, there are more transactions, and when there are more transactions, there is more activity. It's like a person going to the gym. You see, the body is working, is going up, and when you go to the gym, you get built. So that extra money makes you go to the gym. I always used to tell people, the people I live with, that if you start a UBI system, how many people will stay in the house, especially women. Women, most of them are in the houses because they don't have jobs, especially in Africa. But the day you bring that system of $1,000 per month, count the number of people in the house, they will be out. Everybody will go. Someone will go for Kentucky, someone will go to the shop, buy clothes, someone will go somewhere else. So you see, everyone is busy. And when they are busy, the transport services are working. People are traveling, they are using Uber, they are going through the subway, they are doing all of these things. You see? But now, because they don't have money, because they don't have jobs, and they're not in a social welfare net, they stay. They stay in the house 10 hours doing nothing. No economic venture. So they are not adding value to the economy. That's why African economies are weak. So I'm happy with South Africa. South Africa has a good social welfare net. They take care of people. And it has helped. Of course, South Africa still has its own problems because of its history, but it will be solved with time. But in terms of responding to the poverty amongst black people, they have done very well through social welfare nets. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what African countries should do. And look at how many billionaires they have with their social welfare system. The highest number of billionaires are in South Africa. And that's what you need to understand. Alright, guys. Let's go for part 2. And I may change the location for some of the videos.